Hey there, and welcome to Scaling Up Your Impact. I'm your host, Kelly Smythe Dent, the founder of Scaling Up, here with some quick insights, tips, and tools for therapists. Don't forget to sign up for our free weekly newsletter. You'll get the latest episodes, workbooks, and practical resources to support your growth. You'll find the link right in the show notes. Thanks for listening. Let's dive in. Welcome back to the Scaling Up Your Impact podcast, everybody. I am Robyn with Scaling Up, and I am really excited to be coming live again with a special guest talking about infant and early childhood mental health. This is really a great topic because we have a lot of people asking us about working with infants and young children and teenagers, and like how do you tie it all together? How do you work with various forms of trauma or other adverse experiences with kids that either don't have the language at all or are developing the language for their experiences, but are obviously expressing a lot of distress and need support in various ways. So we're going to dive in today with Sarai Trujillo, who is an amazing therapist, community connector. I don't know. There's so many awesome ways to describe your work, Sarai. But before we do that, just a reminder that this Scaling Up Your Impact podcast is a really neat podcast in that we deliver practical trauma-informed tools, mindset shifts, and clinical strategies for therapists who want to grow without burning out. We're here to help you along that journey and that path in a way that feels values aligned and rooted in sustainability so that you're able to keep doing the work that you love to do for as long as you would love to do it. So Sarai, welcome back to the show. So grateful to have you join us and share some time with us. Last time you were on the show, you talked about perinatal mental health. So anyone who hasn't checked that out, definitely go do that after listening to this episode. And as I mentioned, we're going to be talking about infant and early childhood mental health. Sarai, hello, welcome back. Share with the listeners a little bit more about you and your work before we get started.
Hi, Robyn. Thank you. It's good to be back. And yeah, as you said, my name's Sarai Trujillo, and I'm located in Colorado. And I have a small group private practice where I work with a range of ages, stages of development, and issues because I work in a rural community and have always, worked with uh, all ages and all kinds of issues because of that. Started out in community mental health and then moved into private practice later. And I think in addition to that, I am a mother of 7 children. And yes, I birthed all those babies. They're grown now, but that's given me a lot of personal lived experience in um, working with children and understanding infants. And then I have 10 grandchildren now and have just kind of leaned into professional opportunities that I've had to learn and understand more about infant and early childhood development. And in fact, before I became a mental health therapist, after I had my undergrad degree and was still kind of figuring out what I wanted to do further on, I worked as an early Head Start home visitor. So that's really where I got my foundation in working with the 0 to 3 age range, going into families' homes and walking them through different stages of development. And that was really beautiful work that I loved. And as I was doing that work, I recognized that I particularly loved the social emotional aspect, the social emotional development, the bonding and attachment, the relational pieces. And that actually gave me a lot of foundation to then go forward and decide to become a therapist and get my master's degree. And mental health. So a little
Yeah.
bit about me and how I got here.
Amazing. How fun that had to have been. I love that age range, the 0 to 3. So fun. I remember with my own child, just how fun those years were. Obviously, it's a lot of transition and change, learning how to be a parent to a new one. No matter which number it is, your first or your seventh, it's such a transition, such an experience, and learning how that child is, like you were talking about, bonding and attachment and just that social emotional piece. It's such a cool time, I think, in a person's life. I miss it. I'm in the teen years now, the early teen years with my kids. So I'm like, I remember when you were one and you just wanted to help all the time. And now you're like, Mom, I don't want to. I'm talking to my friends. Okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's such a great time, and I can understand being really drawn to learning more about that experience for young children. And so yeah, I love that you explored that, and now you do so much work in this area in your personal life, loving on your grandbabies and
Mhm.
loving on kids in the community. Tell us a little bit about how you work in the community now. Like, what are some of the things that you do in your practice when you're working with infants and young children?
Yeah, I think when I backing up a little bit, when I became graduated from my master's program and became a therapist, I immediately started working as both dual early childhood infant mental health consultant and family clinician in community mental health. And so from that point on, part of my week was spent in early childhood classrooms, supporting teachers, supporting parents, supporting children, um, doing still a little bit of home visit work, but mostly in various school and early childhood settings. And then the other half of my time was spent in the office doing clinical mental health counseling with, again, all ranges of populations, but one of the few therapists in the community mental health center who was comfortable working with the younger ages and stages of development. So from there, you know, one of the things that was really difficult for me to leave community mental health and go into private practice, which is what I had always wanted to do, was to leave behind that aspect of being in the classrooms, doing that consultation work, the team-based work. So one of the things that I did, um, is continued to get my own consultations so that I continue to work with other professionals who work with young children. And so I continue to get that support and that consultation, that peer support, and also joining different um, organizations or being involved in community, whether it be with the library that is doing a special parent program, or the hospital wanting to have me come out and talk about a specialty topic, um, working with, Postpartum Support International, just different ways to be able to like keep those connections and those relationships going,
Mhm.
continuing to work with the Colorado Association for Infant Mental Health, in ways where I'm taking ongoing continuing education and helping with their endorsement processes. And so these have been ways that I've been able to stay like connected to that infant early childhood community. And but in my private practice, most of my work is still one-on-one with parents, seeking support, offering maybe a parent group that might walk them through like a circle of security parenting program or a child-parent relationship therapy program, and really partnering with parents to empower them to be a healer for their own child. That's where my real passion is right now, as far as how this work looks.
Yeah. I love that. And I love that you've been able to find ways to stay connected in that community sense through those groups. Because yeah, that would be a tough transition. It's like so different when you're in private practice. In that, the very end there, you said something that reminded me of what we talked about in the perinatal mental health episode, which was something to the effect of when you're working with pregnant people and helping them to heal or continue their journey towards emotional, social, mental health, all of that. You're also helping the developing baby, the fetus, and also, that newborn. And you just talked about how supporting parents in this way so that they can be, empowered to be a healing agent for their child. It just feels like such a through line, right? And I would love to explore that a little bit more if you're open to sharing what that means and what that looks like in practice. What does it mean as a parent to a 3-month-old to be a healing agent for them?
Hmm. Yeah, it's a beautiful question. And I do think perinatal mental health and infant mental health and early childhood mental health are they're so interconnected, and it's all relational work.
Mhm.
I think sometimes I'll get the question like, what do you do, like therapy on infants? It's like, well, kind of. It's relational though. You've got
Yeah.
a caregiver in there that
Mhm.
you're working with. And so think about, for example, a caregiver who maybe has a really difficult traumatic birth experience. Maybe their baby was born early. Their baby spent some time in the NICU. There was some disruption to the bonding attachment that normally happens in those first couple of weeks, where we're just kind of falling in love with each other. But this parent had to go home, and I had this experience myself when I gave birth to twins. So I'm speaking also from personal experience of like how that can feel so isolating and disruptive to a caregiver, and how with the right kind of relational support, um, a therapist can come in with psychoeducation about the difference between bonding and attachment, about rupture and repair, and all of these beautiful concepts that let caregivers know, A, you're not alone, there's nothing wrong with you, and that there is care and support here, and that repair can be made. And um, and to help them come up with a new story. Like, it doesn't have to continue to go in this certain direction. There can be shifts made, and the story can change course. And so I think those are some of the things that, in my mind, they prevent so many worse worse scenarios further down the road. Like, this is early intervention, prevention work, and it can be so important and powerful for parents, and then children in those critical developmental phases,
Yeah.
to get that kind of professional support.
hmm Yeah. I'm curious how that idea of the story can change, and the perspective can change, how that, because those examples that you brought up seemed to be related to circumstances that might get better, right? So a baby might not always be in the NICU, right? A baby might not always, um, right? Like those types of situations might not be long term. How do you support new parents in support being healing agents for their infants when their circumstances may not change? It could be environmental, it could be, related to economical things, disability, all the things that maybe the circumstances won't change, but can the story still change? And how does that look long term? maybe long term in this instance is like the first 3 years, right? If we're talking about like the infant to like 3 years, and maybe during that 3 years, there's some chaotic, things that are ongoing or it's high stress scenarios. What does it look like in that case? Because I'm guessing a lot of people will have that question, just like I did.
Hmm. Yeah, so we're talking about what our social, political, um, cultural place in the world is, and how that's also impacting
Hmm.
these critical years of development. And so for me, again, there's a lot of like, this is relational work. So a lot of psychoeducation, what parents are often held responsible for so many things and feel responsible for so many things that um, it's helpful to kind of tease apart, well, what's realistic and what are unrealistic expectations that are being put on you. And I think often about this example from Dr. Bruce Perry in his book. um, I think it's called Born for Love. It's about how to increase empathy. But, he talks about historically how for each baby being born into the world, historically, throughout human families and many different places around the world, there have been about 4 adults for every one infant born, 4 available adults, whether it's parents, aunties, uncles, grandparents, to meet those emotional, developmental needs of that infant. And you think about how in our culture and time and place, that ratio is flipped, not only in the family where there is 1 or 2 adults that are now set up to meet all of the needs of this new baby, but then when that baby or toddler goes to preschool, now we have ratios of, if you're in an infant classroom, maybe there's 4 adults, or sorry, 4 infants to every 1 adult. So that ratio's flipped. And then, of course, as you go up into like a preschool classroom, those ratios get even larger as far as children to adults in the classroom. And so the pressure that we're putting on parents and caregivers to meet, I think it's very validating for people to hear and understand, like, you're being asked to do a lot more than what has historically been asked of parents to do. So
Mhm.
how can then, with that information, we start to work together to build a team and a care of support for you, and to take away some of the shame
Yeah.
around that, around asking for help, about bringing more caretaking in,
Mhm.
to your circle, about not being the only one or only two to meet all the needs of this baby. Um,
Yeah.
and that can be really hard, frustrating, long work. And so it's also not work that I'm in and out of really quickly all the time. It's like I'm one of those people that
Yeah.
might be in your team for a while.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah. It's not short term, three to 5 sessions and you're good, kind of thing, or, one class and you're good. It's an ongoing type of support. And it feels like when you, at least how you do it, it feels like you are part of that community. You're not, quote unquote, just a resource, right? Or just a service provider. You're part of that support community for them to be able to learn, for them to be able to offer what they can, and then have you offer what you can and really share that. And I think that's a beautiful way of expressing it. Um, yeah,
And that's very much individualized, like I said, or
yeah,
like we were talking about, for folks who maybe um, need or deserve a little bit more of that support versus other folks who maybe do have access to more resources and care networks. And it's still about like, yeah, how do we like build that for you?
yeah, yeah. I remember a key thing from my own childhood was determining, I knew because of various circumstances, I knew I had to find trusted adults outside of my nuclear family. And I don't know how I knew that, I think we're wise beings. And so part of me just knew I had to do that. And I wasn't consciously seeking out interviewing people, obviously, but it was kind of connecting with, the parents of my friends, like which ones felt safe enough for me in case I ever needed something. Or when I was at their house, how did I feel? And what need that met versus when I was at my house. And obviously, I was older than 3 months or 3 years. But I remember then that turned into me being a teenager and really finding that at times when I really, really needed it because of the way that my parents were not able to be available to me as much as they wanted to be. They couldn't because of life circumstances, health and illness, all of that stuff. So when I became a parent, before I became a parent, I wanted that to be one of the main values or main things that I wanted to instill in my parenthood journey and to communicate to my child. I wanted to give her that permission to be okay talking to someone that's not me or feeling safe with someone that's not me because I didn't want her to feel any kind of guilt. Like, I'm supposed to talk to my mom. Well, yeah, I'd love for you to talk to me. Love it. And also, I'm one person. And even if I had every resource available, full capacity, got all my sleep, all my nutrients, all the things to fill my cup, I'm still just one person. And I don't believe that, we can give everything that another person's going to need, no matter who it is. And so from the very beginning, I surrounded myself with people who, well, it was kind of an accident. My close friends and I all had babies in the same year and a half. But these were friends that I intentionally remained really connected to during those times because of that value and because of knowing that my 3-month-old has no idea why I'm doing this. But my 13-year-old will experience the benefits and be like, wait a minute, this has been like this my whole life. Even when it feels like I'm completely alone in a scenario, or through a period of time, I know that what we've set up, you know, we won't be alone. And if something were to happen to me, my child will not be alone. There are people. And when she just doesn't want to talk to me because I'm, weird, boring old mom, okay, here's other people. Or when she's really struggling, she can talk to other people. And I know that I did that because of my own struggles, right, as a child. And so I knew I didn't want my child to feel isolated and not know what to do and kind of struggle to figure out what do I do? How do I get my needs met? Um, and so that feels like something that you were talking about. Like that feels like being a healing agent from the moment I knew I was pregnant. It was like, okay, there's a lot that's going to have to be done in terms of my own like relational healing process because it's not easy, as you know. And so I just think that's so beautiful how that can be expressed. And that looks so different now than it was when she was an infant. Um, Things get more complicated in many ways. And I've noticed, and maybe you've noticed this in working long term with your families, that it seems to be pretty cyclical. It's like now we're kind of doing some of the things that you might do with your families when you're working with a family with an infant. Like we are doing some of that stuff now. And we've done some of it before. And I don't know, it just feels like this cyclical process. And I feel like we're constantly, because it's so relational, it's like I feel like we're always going back to those initial bonds and those initial years and those initial months. And when it feels really hard, we ultimately want what we felt or what we wish we had during those early months. And I don't know if that's just my experience. Do you notice that with the families you work with as well, or even in your own experience personally?
I when I'm doing EMDR training, EMDR basic training, I really love the attachment in
Hmm.
EMDR section.
Hmm.
I think I could just talk about that all day long because in my experience of doing EMDR therapy with folks, almost everything, if there's a relational component to it in the here and now, goes back to early childhood, goes back to those initial experiences like you're talking about. And it's not just with the parents, but it's with all the different caregivers. So you're talking about, community and having friends. And there's a book out called McLean Duclef, Hunt Gather Parent, and she
Ah.
talks a lot about allo parents, and that's sort of the term of like that. A lot of, indigenous cultures around the world who haven't been too impacted by, Western industrial, parenting shifts still have a lot of allo parents involved in the upbringing of children. And those can be older siblings or other, and like I said, other aunties. And so these early caregiving relationships, those early attachments, so much goes back to it. And I think a piece that I keep in mind as a professional in this field, and that I also hope that parents can take in, is this concept of we all are living through really difficult times. We have difficult experiences happen in life, whether that is an early medical trauma, birth, NICU, um, a diagnosis of a disability, um, social, economic, marginalization, oppression. There's awful things happening. And when we have buffering relationships in our lives, that can be the difference between an experience being a traumatic experience, a toxic stress
Hmm.
level experience versus a tolerable stress level experience that doesn't become a huge trauma in our lives. And so when I think about this as relational work, I also think about the power of buffering relationships
Hmm.
in our lives, in our children's lives, when things get hard, not if they get hard, but when.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a great way of describing it because, and there's a lot that I feel people want to, there's like these reassurances that we want, around different things about being a caregiver or a parent for our young children, our babies. And we forget that sometimes it's just us, or the allo parents or other caregivers in their lives. That's it. They just need us. And they don't need the 400 toys or the most perfect, I don't know, playlist to fall asleep to. Those things could be very helpful and supportive. And to get through those really adverse experiences or challenging times, often all they need is us. And it seems so simple. And sometimes that's the thing we feel like we can't offer. How do I offer myself in a way that supports my baby and my child when I feel like I have nothing to give? I'm barely making it too. Um, and how, it's not about it being perfect, it's just being enough in that moment. And because I think, we were saying how there's so much expected of one or two parents in the US, especially. Um, I think that there is a common expectation that we have to be, quote unquote, our best self all the time for it to be enough, and that's just not possible, firstly. So then you were saying then there's the shame, right? Um, that comes with that. And so when it comes to that aspect of things, what are some things that you have found helpful or grounding or reassuring for parents, especially of newborns and young children when it's so trying, right? It's brand new with this new baby and maybe there's a lot going on, with
Mhm.
the baby being uncomfortable or you're not sleeping or there be the quote unquote terrible twos, right? All of this, which makes it really hard sometimes for us to be our best selves, not even take into account what's going on in our own personal being and our work or whatever else. What are some things you have found really helpful for parents and caregivers during those moments?
Yeah. Um, one story coming to mind is actually with one of my own children who was getting ready to have their own first child
Mhm.
and came to me, as mom and also as an expert in the field and said, "What is the one thing that I can do that's going to
Yeah.
be the best thing for this baby?"
Don't want to break my baby. What do I do? What's the secret? The one
What's the
thing.
one thing? And this is a child who's very concrete, and so my brain was like, "Crap, I get to say the one thing. What would it be?" But then I quickly kind of settled into enough care for you. When
Ooh,
the parent is felt like they are cared for, they have enough sleep, they have enough resources and support, that translates then to the baby. And so if I had to say what was the one thing that's it. But one of the ways that I sometimes get to what is it that the parent is struggling with or what do they need? And so what then can we focus on in treatment
mhm.
is the working model of the child interview, which I've been trained in, and it's Tulane University offers this very easily accessible training in it, and it it really pairs beautifully with EMDR
Hmm.
therapy from my perspective, because with the working model of the child interview, it's a structured interview process that you're doing with the parent, and you're getting a sense of their internal schema, their internal working model for their child, for their relationship with their child, whether it's an infant or a young child. You get so much deep insight on what was the tone of like the first couple of weeks postpartum? What were some of your thoughts even during pregnancy, impressions about this child? Who does your child remind you of? And then it also gets into the struggles. Where are your biggest sort of activating? Where do you get the most distress in the relationship with your child?
Uh-huh.
So you can start to see how then my EMDR brain starts going, okay, so follow the distress. Those are the things to focus on in targeting for EMDR reprocessing, because if we can then update this parent's internal working model to be more adaptive instead of I'm a bad parent
Yeah.
because to that, instead of that shame cycle, to see all that they have done and to be able to change that, it changes the trajectory of the relationship with their child and how they're able to show up and be a parent. Um, so that's um, yeah, a beautiful sort of pairing that I found in this work, the working model, the child interview that I learned in my early childhood, infant mental health trainings, and then EMDR therapy.
I love that. I've never heard of that because yeah, I've never heard of that, but I could see how they really do go well together. Um, and that just seems so powerful. Um, it made me think of a question that seems a little bit like out of nowhere, but given, I think it was your question about, or the part about like, what was the first 2 weeks like? What was your impression of this child? And then I was thinking, what was the impression that they were having of themselves? Like while they're pregnant, when I give birth, I'm going to be this kind of parent. I'm going to do these types of things. And I don't mean those always those aspirational, like, or the things like I'm never going to, co-sleep. I don't mean that. I mean, like other like those little intricacies and how they're going to handle their own feelings while they're handling their baby or their worldview. I didn't think I would do that. I didn't think I would feel so frustrated and have a tone of voice, right? Those little things as well. I think all of that encompassed. And I think about how do you think social media, especially when it comes to like infant and early childhood type influencers, display or portray what it is to be a parent during these times or how to provide. It could be any type of influencer that's out there, having a baby or doing things. Look at my haul. Look at my Amazon haul, and they have like 500 things from Amazon, all of these baby things. This perfect or this curated profile around early childhood years or, you know, so I'm really curious you might have a million thoughts about it and opinions but I'm super curious about how you think social media has shifted the way that new parents perceive themselves and how they would be with their child. And then when it doesn't line up, in real life, that doesn't line up. I'm so curious. I don't know, maybe I'm way off, but like, is that even a thing? What do you experience in your practice?
That's interesting question. And I don't know that I can speak to it too much. When you mentioned when you were a parent bringing a child into the world, you surrounded yourself with friends and support, and I did too. And I don't know if I said this in this podcast. My children are adults now. I have grandchildren, and one of those friends that I've stayed in touch with recently reminded me, we're the elders now.
Yeah.
And so when you're talking about social media, I'm like, I don't know that as the elder now that I really understand what that's like. I do have children who are parenting in this day and age, and from what I understand from them and some different clients that I work with, it's a mixed bag. Like they might learn something really helpful and useful, like this about this book, Hunt, Gather, Parent by McLean Duclef. That's like really helpful and gives them this, perspective.
Mhm.
And there is, as you sort of alluded to, intense social pressure to have parenting look or be a
Yeah.
certain way. But
Mhm.
if I come back down to the foundations of infant early childhood mental health work is relational work, again, being an elder, it's hard for me to understand how social media can be relational in the same way that I'm talking about with buffering relationships with people, real live people who show up and offer care
Yeah.
when needed, who can allo parent with you, with your children, and you can allo parent with them with their children. So for me, those seem like two very separate worlds, and there might be something that I'm not understanding about that social media can provide that, because
Mhm.
again, that's not like
Right.
my generation.
Yeah. Yeah, I think about when you were talking about how the ratios now, at least, here in the US and other Western industrialized places, the ratio, parents don't have allo parents, right? Or they are more isolated because of that and many other factors. And so it seems like there could be an attempt to replace, I don't have this, but I can go online and see other people doing it and learn from them, and then I don't feel alone, right? I may not have someone to ask advice. This is happening, what would you do? Which is part of the community allo parenting, dynamic is getting that support and advice those tough moments. And it's not a complete replacement because social media is not relational. And it often leads us to a place of, even more disconnection, I think, when it's used in that way. I was pregnant during the boom of Pinterest. And so being a Pinterest mom, was all the thing. It was such a pressure. And I remember feeling that, and I even had my close friends, but they were also feeling the pressure of being Pinterest moms. And that meant, learning how to make your own baby food from home and look at this Pinterest, whatever. And it's like, we have no idea what we're doing. And that's okay to not know what you're doing, but you're relying on a post, an online blog or a post versus getting together with your friend and be like, do you want to experience it? You want to experiment with baby food? Like, would that be fun? Do we even want to do this? Or are we doing it because Pinterest is telling us that this is what it means to be a good mom?
Mhm.
And so I feel like that was something that was a really powerful thread in my early years of parenting, and how that led to now, years later, after feeling being not able to measure up to that. And it just compounded, from, making your own baby food and having it set up in these little jars that look fantastic in a photo on Pinterest. Um, to having the perfect birthday party with all of these things, right? The balloon wall and the whatever, whatever. And all of this is on Pinterest and all the themes, right? And it was before we had influencers on Instagram, things like that. It was like on Pinterest. And then there was a time where me and my friends and some clients that I was even working with at that time, then there was this repulsion because it just created it was like that toxic stress in us. And it
Mhm.
felt like I can't even show up to be a relational parent because I'm so constantly worried about not measuring up to what social media says I should be doing. I'm not doing that for my kids, but I'm doing these things. Is that okay? Right? Is it okay and it was, yes, it was absolutely okay. And that's actually
Mhm.
what's needed. They don't need, you know, the themed birthday party. Um,
Mhm.
and so I think that might be why that question just popped up for me because, had I do think that makes a big impression in how people are seeking out or how people seek out that connection during parenting and that guidance and sharing the load. We may not have anyone to share the load with, but if I can go online and see other people doing it, it's like I'm tricking my brain into thinking I'm not alone,
Mhm.
sharing the load in this very odd way that we know is not real either, right? And so it's this constant tug of war between that reality and the the fake reality we put ourselves in to make it through. And maybe it sounds extreme, but sometimes it feels that extreme, right? I have to put myself in this alternate reality of social media because this is so hard doing it alone. And yeah. So I could see how, like, during those early years, that could really interrupt some of that bonding or some of that being able to be a healing agent because we're just so wrapped up in that stress of like, well, these people are doing it this way. Why can't I do it this way? Um, or I'm
Mhm.
reaching out to these people on the internet. Yes, they're real people, but they're not actually in my life and they're not in my community. And what they have on here is curated. It's not their full real life either. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, when you're talking about that, I'm just thinking too about how it's so important for me to show up for parents in a way and young children that there's again empowerment
Yes.
that they're like as you're just describing this effect of social media, it felt very disempowering as a parent rather than empowering. And at the end of the day, I hope that after parents work with me, they feel like I'm a good parent. I've got this.
Mhm.
And that they feel empowered regardless of what's happening in their lives. I can handle it. I've got this. I'm a good parent. I know who to trust. I know how to, you know, resource. I can trust myself. And then those things, are passed on to then children to also feel empowered and that they've got somebody who's got them.
Mhm. Yes.
And And so, yeah, I think if social media could do that, that would be great. I just don't know that I've seen a lot of examples of that happening.
Same. I haven't either. It is great for getting certain resources, it is great for that.
Mhm.
Um, and it just feels like the whole point is that empowerment. And I am a good parent and I'm capable of figuring things out, of reaching out for support. It's, and that is exactly how we can be that healing agent even when things are still a hot mess, all around us or even within us, we feel like we're just this hot mess. Um, but we're empowered hot messes. And that means that we can figure out a way forward. And if we can figure out a way forward and our kiddos experience that and that felt sense, that relational sense, then when they're older, they'll realize, oh, wait, me too.
Mhm.
Me too. I can do that too. Um, and I'm a good blah 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 too, right? And I just think that that is just so important. Because there's times in parenting where we're gonna see what our kid is going through and think, oh gosh, we messed up. Or, doom and gloom, right? And really it's not the end of the story. They're in a struggle, but because we've been that relational healing agent for them, they find and get that sense of like, no, but I still can figure this out. I'm still a good person, right? All of these things. Just because we're struggling doesn't mean we've lost that. Um,
Yeah, you use the term hot mess, even in the midst of when I'm feeling like a hot mess, and I think that's a concern a lot of parents have. Like if I'm dysregulated,
mhm,
then that's going to impact my child, and yes, but maybe not in the way you think, because again, it's empowering when you as a parent can show up in your full, authentic
mhm.
human self, the light and the dark, the
Yep.
hot mess, the put together, the dysregulation and the regulation,
Yeah.
um, because it gives our children permission to be their full human selves.
Right.
And I remember one of my grandchildren was really into the show Gabby's Dollhouse.
Okay. I
And so
remember.
yeah, she would come over and she'd watch it. And a couple of things that I love about Gabby's Dollhouse as I was kind of watching that were this growth mindset that was often demonstrated by, well, I don't know that yet. Like if I don't know something, I don't know it yet. And so this idea of like, then I can go and kind of like you were talking about as a parent, but also as a child and kind of like figure out and discover it. If I don't know it yet,
Yes.
that's okay. I can learn. And then the other thing was when a mistake was made or something didn't work out the way they wanted it to, they called it a whoopsie.
Oh,
And
I
it was
love
just this
that.
really beautiful way of like just it's okay to make mistakes and that's part of the process.
Yeah.
Those are messages that I think are really powerful for this, infant to early childhood range and parents raising young children is this
Mhm.
growth mindset and this idea of mistakes are part of the human experience and maybe we even just call it a whoopsie now.
Right. Oopsie.
Whoopsie, and now let's go figure out the next thing or
Hmm.
make the repair that needs to be made.
Hmm. Hmm.
But I guess when I think about those things, I think about how Gabor Mate, and I know scaling up, you share some of Gabor Mate's work in your basic trainings,
Hmm.
between folks having to choose between attachment and authenticity.
Oh, that video. Woo!
It's
Goosebumps.
powerful, right?
Yes.
But when we add this component of growth mindset into this developmental phase of our lives and the whoopsie, we
Hmm.
don't have to give up our authenticity. We don't have to make that decision between attachment or authenticity.
Hmm. Yeah. And how we show up as parents and caregivers during those early childhood years when we can't sit them down and explain what whoopsie means, right? Like you're 3 months old, you're, 1 year old. It's how we approach it, and it's how we approach the relationship too. Like, man, I remember, working with some families as well, like in my early, like my first year or two of my practice. I thought I wanted to work with younger kids, and I realized I do not, primarily because I had a younger kid. And I was like, I'm struggling. And so I remember working with some families around things like that, about how, you know, they really wanted to know, but how do I reassure my child? How do I tell them? How do I help them understand? And I would say, well, you just be the way that you want them to, understand you and how you want them to learn things, right? If you want your child to learn the whoopsie, you have to integrate it with yourself, right? And help yourself be okay. Like, okay, we're going to whoopsie this, like no more perfectionism, no more. And it's never like cut and dry, right? We have our whoopsie moments, even in getting into our whoopsie process. But yeah, it's about so much. How do we infuse this and make it our thing and not just a teachable moment, or, kind of externalize it or intellectualize it? It's more this relational. We can be whoopsie together too. And sometimes that, it's messy and funky and weird. And also what I think is beautiful is that when we do that later, for all of you parents who have young children now, they're infants now, and the whoopsies seem really small. And you're like, is this even really going to matter? Or how do I know? When they're 13 and they call you out on your whoopsies, because they
Mhm.
will, and then you'll be like, yes, it worked. It worked. And then you move through that later, or you move through the whoopsie together, or you're like, ooh, I got to take responsibility for that. I got to figure out how to make this right. I need to make some shifts and changes, and then I can circle back to this and, um, because sometimes those whoopsies that our kids inform us about, um, when they're teenagers, it takes it once again, we have to, connect to our own empowerment and like, I can shift and grow in this way because this is a real thing I do want to work on,
Mhm.
and be a little more aligned. So I feel like you will know when the whoopsie mindset, like there's evidence, it may not be in how they're approaching their math homework or a struggle in their relationship with a friend, right? Peer pressure or something like that. And it may come out in them calling you out and holding you accountable. But I feel like that's a really good indicator. They feel safe enough. Like, you whoopsied me back in the day and all the time. This is reciprocal. You know,
Mhm.
you did a whoopsie, mommy.
Well,
Um,
and you're talking about authenticity
exactly.
in relationship and how that can grow over time. And I'm thinking about Bell Hooks and her definition of love in her book All About Love. Accountability and honesty are a part of that equation of love, and it's bringing your authentic self
Hmm.
into that. And again, being able to, I think one of the powerful things about EMDR therapy, and where I get really excited about integrating EMDR therapy with this work, is if we think about the brain and its predictive processing mechanisms of action, like it's predicting, like, I'm a bad parent. I have all this trauma. My baby has all this trauma. That's what the brain starts to perceive and see and
Yes.
take in. And when we can identify that early on through something like the working model of the child interview, or just through really understanding folks, what are those distress points, and how can we then update the brain to shift that? So instead of I'm a bad parent, I'm a good parent, and I'm operating from this predictive processing system of I'm a good parent. I can figure this out. Being a good parent means I get care for myself so that I can care for my children. Being a good parent means I'm human. I can be my authentic self in this. And I'm translating all of that then into this relationship. And that's how we create a world with more with more adolescents who are connected to their authenticity
Mhm.
and their relationships and
Mhm.
feel those buffering relationships, feel that holding, feel
Yeah.
that connection,
Mhm.
and
Yeah.
have healthier outcomes.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Even when, I just want to add, like, even when that is revealed during a time of struggle, I think I just wanted to point that out probably for my past and future self and all the past and future selves of all the listeners. I had that, when you said that, I had this notion that I would see the like fruit of the labor through like a beautiful, like, quote unquote good moment, a good time. No, I've seen it repeatedly during a time of struggle,
Mhm.
challenge. And that's helped me rewrite the story, talking about full circle when we first started this episode. That
Mhm.
helped me rewrite the story, even of like all these past years, just this moment, and having the feedback from a few people like, no, no, this is, they weren't trying to change my mind about anything. They didn't even know the story I had, right? But just them saying what they were saying, and I was like, oh, like I have been doing it.
Mhm.
We have been doing it. And this is like the fruit on the tree. And or something, maybe fruit's the wrong word because, I don't know. It's something about it that just feels like you will have that manifest in different times. It could be during a beautiful blooming spring, and it could be during, a giant winter blizzard where you can't even see in front of you. But something is revealed to you of like, it's working, you know?
Well, on that note, if I can share just a
Yeah,
personal example,
please.
um, and I'll sh often share this or similar stories with parents because when we do this kind of work, what you're saying is so true. It'll show up in all the moments.
Mhm.
And I remember having one of my children come to me and tell me early on when they were young that they were feeling suicidal.
Mhm.
And for me, that was a very difficult moment, but also a moment that spoke to the authenticity and
Mhm.
the attachment that was founded there in that relationship, because otherwise that child would not have been able to come to me in that moment of
Yeah.
struggle and share that. And then, so telling parents, when you do this work, be ready
Yeah.
for, like you said, the 13-year-old to call you out on your whoopsie, or your child to share with you really tender, difficult, authentic struggles that they're having in their life, and make sure that you have the support and the resources that you need to be able to hold that, because a lot of us as parents didn't necessarily have that kind of parenting ourselves. So we're kind
Oh,
of doing this twofold. We're like
yeah.
learning it, trying to do it differently, holding the things our children are now bringing to us and going, wait a second. Well, when I was suicidal as a kid, I never told anybody because it wasn't safe enough. I couldn't be authentic.
Right. Yeah. Yes. Hmm. And that, our children coming to us with those really tough admissions or those experiences, and it could be that, it could be something else. I think a lot of times parents use that as a sign that they've been doing something wrong. Well, my kid wouldn't feel this way if there's something wrong with what I'm doing. I missed it or whatever it is. And I think when we shift the story of what you were saying, my child did not have to abandon their authenticity. They didn't have to, they felt safe enough to tell me. And that is an indicator that I am doing really well. I'm doing a good job. Am I perfect? No. Could there be things in the home or in our relationship that contribute to it? Sure. However, it's a really big indicator of that authenticity and safety that they're telling you. And I would like to add, they can tell you through proxy as well. You know,
Hmm.
and that doesn't mean that they don't have the safety or authenticity because with you as a parent, because often, I've seen that as well in myself and other people, clients I'm working with. It's like, well, why did they tell this person and not me? Right? And does it mean something? I'm like, it might and it might not. But what it also means is the person they told, they knew they were going to tell you,
Hmm.
and sometimes we need a buffer, you
And
know?
an allo parent.
An owl parent. I mean, come on. How many times do I, as an adult, call my friend or my sister and be like, can you help me walk through this conversation I need to have with this person over here? Like I just want to work it out, or I'm scared for whatever reason, right? Or I just need support before I tell this person, but I really want them to know, right?
Mhm.
So, but that doesn't mean that they think you're a terrible, whatever the relational is, right? Like it just means they need a buffer. They need an allo parent, and that's not something bad. That's actually
That-
really good.
That's something I did good. So again, yeah,
Yes.
how do I perceive that story? It's so much about that internal schema. And for me, I remember um years and years and years and years ago when I had young children still at home.
Mhm.
I was at this leadership retreat, and we were having this experience of sharing like essence of ourselves with each other, sort of capstone
Mhm.
sharing this event that we just done together. And what a woman gets up and she says, the main thing about her is I'm a good mom. And then she just went on for like 15 minutes telling us all about how she's a good mom and why she's an amazing mom and the evidence of that and how this defines her, and coming from where she came from in a place of such struggle, again, not having the kind of buffering relationships, the kind of environmental, social resources, being able to come from a place like that, teen parent, to be able to embody this knowing of I'm a good mom. I I had several children, and I wasn't feeling that way at the time. And I remember like, wow, thinking I want that.
Yeah.
And also I want that for every parent. Like
Mhm.
how much could just that alone shift
Mm.
so much for parents and children.
Yeah. Yeah. And in the future,
Hmm.
those children will create and exist in, or have to exist in the creation of others, but as they recreate it. Um, yeah,
Yeah.
wow, that's really powerful. Hmm. Yeah,
Everyone deserves that, I think, just to,
yeah,
every parent who's out there trying their best,
yeah,
within the circumstances of this world, if nothing else,
yeah.
deserves to feel like I'm a good parent.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. And just to recap some of the things that you talked about, what makes a good parent is making sure, or getting the care you need as a parent. So it's not about being perfect or struggle free. It's about what care do you need, could be big and small, and feeling that connection to your own authenticity and being able to be yourself and not require to lose the connection with your children in order to be your authentic self, and vice versa. And also feel that sense of empowerment within yourself. And those three things sound great. And we know that it can take a long road of healing work and shifting and changing a lot about your internal process and your worldview, and recalibrating expectations you have of yourself, and taking accountability and responsibility for certain things. It takes a lot. So those are beautiful and they're wonderful and amazing. And I wish they just like showed up in our at our doorstep, or we woke up one day and we felt that way. Um, but the work that parents are doing in their journey, it matters. Even if it feels slow and like there's really no progress that you can tell yet, it really does matter. And it's a worthy road to be on, to cultivate those things. I think, what do you think, Sarai? Do you think it's a constant or like ongoing cultivation? It's not something you would achieve once and have forever. If you're always cultivating these things in yourself, in your relationship with your children.
Absolutely. And it's never too late for repair.
Yes.
I'll kind of come back to the story I shared with the child who informed me early on about their struggles with suicidality and depression. That child's an adult now, and during actually one of my EMDR basic trainings where I was the trainer, I had just got done training all these other professionals about EMDR and attachment. And man, I was feeling like such the expert, so like on top of the world, excited. And then it was lunch, and during the break, that child called me and said, Mom, so I just wanted to update you on some things in my life. And in the conversation, they said, I've been talking to my therapist about some of my own attachment wounds and the ways that you didn't show up for me in my life. I was just like, oh
Oh, the timing.
yeah. Timing was just perfect. And so leaning into what I know and my own growth process, it's like, okay, what is that? Thank you for sharing that with me. And also, like, how can I repair? What can I do? What do you need now?
Mm-hmm.
And we were able to have that conversation. But to speak to what you're saying, it's a journey. There is no arrival. I consider myself an expert in the field
Mm-hmm.
of infant early childhood mental health, attachment, EMDR therapy, and mother of 7, grandmother of 10 and growing. And I'm an amazing grandmother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. And I am still learning. I still have repair to make.
Yes.
This isn't something that we arrive at. A good parent doesn't mean, like you said, I'm a perfect parent. In fact, there is some research to show us that perfect parenting isn't good for children. We want we
Yeah.
want human parents. We want good enough parents who are engaged in this. And it is work and it's heartbreaking at times. I was humbled in that moment.
Mhm.
Um, and also proud of myself for being able to be humbled.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Wow. What a moment. Oh, that's beautiful. Well, Sarai, I feel like we could talk all day about this, and many other things. Um, But I'm curious if there are any final things that you would like to share with our audience, perhaps, lessons along the way or tips for wanting to work with work at that early childhood stage of development and relational work with new parents. What feels like the right thing to close out with?
Hmm. It's a good question. What's, I'm after more reflection, I might have a different answer.
Mhm.
Right now, what's coming up for me are just some of those reminders about this is relational work. And I do think that if this isn't an area as a professional that you're comfortable working and speaking to like professionals, leaning into some early childhood infant mental health consultation, because that kind of consultation really does help with like how much we bring our personal selves into the therapeutic relationship to affect change.
Yeah.
And it's something that's maybe a little bit out of the comfort zone of folks who've just sort of been standard trained in psychotherapy. Um, you know, Buffering relationships, the fact that this is relational work, I think are pretty foundational. And then to parents, I think that the message is that you are okay, you are good enough. And if there is anything that is bothering you or causing you distress, that there is a way, there is help available, that those schemas, those internal working models,
Mhm.
those predictive processes of the brain, absolutely can shift, and EMDR is a powerful tool to help make those shifts happen.
Yeah, amazing. Amazing. I think that's really supportive and caring advice to close us out. So thank you for sharing that. And thank you again for sharing time with me and sharing more about you and your experience and your perspectives and all of this. It's just been wonderful, so joyful. I'm so grateful to start my day talking with you today, Sarai. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Robyn.
Absolutely. And for our listeners, we really hope you enjoyed this episode. And if this is an area of work that you really are interested in diving into, I'm going to leave you with two little nuggets from Sarai of that growth mindset. You might not know yet what you need to know or what you need to shift and change. You might not have the confidence yet that this is for you, especially after hearing how relational it is. I can imagine some people are like, well, I'm feeling nervous. That's okay. You might not feel ready yet, but you can absolutely get there and keep going and growing just like Sarai has. And you're going to have plenty of whoopsie moments along the way. And we are here to support you as a team, as Scaling Up, Sarai as a consultant and community member in rural Colorado, and also doing lots of virtual consultations. So head over to our show notes so you can get access to Sarai's website if you want to schedule a consultation session with her, or you want to set up a training for your agency, whatever it is that you think Sarai would be a good resource and connection for you and your community, we will have that in the show notes. So we can't wait for you to tune in next time. Until then, keep growing and going and whoopsieing and repairing. We'll see you next time.
Love that.